Roger Parry, thank you very much for joining us to talk about board evaluation. This is a project which, as you know, has its origins a long time back when Sir David Walker asked tomorrow's company to stand back and think about what good looks like. It's great to have you to talk about board evaluation because you have a rather unusual career in terms of your path to your multiple chairmanships. Starting indeed, or at one time as a journalist. Can you say what you think are the qualities of an effective chairman?
I think that it is a different role. It's a very different role from being a chief executive. And actually one of the more difficult transitions is when you make the transition from being a chief executive to a chairman. There's a real temptation, I think, to sort of continue to carry your chief executive ways with you. Because the function clearly is to be more, how would you put it, you're more in listening mode than you are in talking mode. You know, you're more in receive than you are in transmit. But a lot of it is also about understanding the strategic context in which the company operates. You know, not unreasonably, the executive team are pretty focused on delivering the here and now. They're pretty focused on, you know, hitting the monthly numbers, let alone the yearly numbers. Whereas I think the chairman, chairwoman, needs to step back a bit and constantly be sort of thinking on a 3 to 5 year time horizon about where is this company going, what are the threats, what are the opportunities.
So turning to board evaluation, from your own experience, can you say a little bit about what a good board evaluation looks like and what are the key elements?
I think the issue for boards is trying to work out exactly what are they trying to achieve? What is the objective function against which you are evaluating them? I mean, the evaluation of a company is relatively straightforward because you're talking about sales or profits or earnings per share or share price. You know, they're numerically capturable metrics. To decide whether a board is functioning well or not, I think it is much more complex because you can have a situation where the company does pretty well, but actually the board is failing because it should have helped it to do a lot better, and vice versa. You can have companies that are actually struggling because of macro factors, but actually the board did a pretty good job, and if it hadn't been for them, it would be even more disastrous.
And has this view of board evaluation changed over time and with experience?
I think it has. I mean, I've been a chairman now for 15 years or so, and when I first started, it wasn't nearly as much discussed as it is today. It was just sort of a natural assumption that boards would function well. And it was partly, it sort of became fashionable. But the early ones I ran across in kind of the early mid-2000s were very, very process-driven. Nowadays, it's much more concerned with trying to understand the interpersonal dynamics of the board. You know, do they function well as a team? I don't think the early evaluators were looking at it in the context of is it a good team. They were looking at it in a more box-ticky, does it conform with certain metrics?
What's been the most successful example, something where you thought that really worked well, and why?
Well, there's one. It is a very specific example. One of the boards I sit on was concerned that we didn't have the right skills around the boardroom table to comply with the strategic direction that we'd embarked on, because we'd changed direction a bit. And we did ask, in fact, one of the headhunting firms to sort of do a little skills audit. I mean, it was very specific. It wasn't general board evaluation. It was very specific. Yeah. You know, are we? You know, do we feel as if we're missing certain skills? And they said, yes, you are. You're specifically missing someone who really understands where the whole debate about data protection and data privacy is going. And we did actually, as a result of that, the next time a board seat became available, recruit someone with that profile. And having done that, subsequently, we were all very pleased with ourselves because we thought we now actually had a much more informed board discussion than we did before.
I guess that gets us into the very interesting question of you get the initial feedback from the evaluation, and then what happens? You have to decide, I suppose, either on your own or with the senior independent director and maybe the company secretary, what do you do with it? Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because presumably it varies according to what you've found.
I now, at least, always follow the policy that if I get feedback, which is usually written, sometimes it's computer-based screens, I let the whole board see it. So I don't edit the feedback. Right. They get to see exactly what I get to see. Because otherwise, I think people might be quite suspicious that the feedback, and that would be even if I don't actually have this example, it didn't happen to me, but even if there was specific commentary on the performance of one executive or non-executive, I'd still let the whole thing go to the board, because that you're treating them as a collection, and therefore I think they need to get the same feedback that the chairman gets.
And then we get to the issue of how it's communicated outside the board, and in particular how it's communicated to investors, which of course has become a significant issue in the context, especially of listed companies, but applies everywhere. What's your view of that, and the particular tension that might exist between the more you disclose, the more inhibited people might be in their feedback, the less you disclose, the less confident people might feel you've been through a proper exercise?
Well, again, each individual will have their own approach to this. I mean, I think it is correct that you should let your investors know that you have an evaluation process, and possibly even share with them what that process is, whether it's an external evaluator, an online system, an internal system, and if it's an internal system, who did it? Was it the company secretary? Was it the SID? I would be extremely reluctant in any form of printed document or online post to actually communicate anything more than that. I think that if an investor has a specific desire to want to know exactly what was in the evaluation report, I wouldn't be wholly averse to telling them in a one-to-one meeting. But I just can't see any great benefit in taking the results and making them quasi-public, because I think that would inhibit both the participants and the evaluator.
You're a very experienced chairman. If I'm sitting in front of you as a newly appointed chairman of some board, what one piece of advice would you offer me?
Specifically in terms of board evaluation, I would make absolutely sure that all the members of your board wanted to do it, wanted to be subject to it, because it's a collective decision. What I would not do is just pop in one day and say, by the way, we're doing this. I think you would need to discuss with them first and syndicate with them the idea that board evaluation was a good idea.
Roger Parry, thank you very much indeed.